Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and good day. This is the second part of our user-defined class slide. Just to break it down so that it slightly shorter, so that we can be more focused on it. So in the previous video, we were talking about creating object using constructor, and you must use dot in order to access the attributes or the methods within it. Okay, and then we have a look at what is primitive type and object type. Okay, so with objects, what will happen is that you can create many objects, right? So we can call it as instance variable. Okay, meaning that if you have many objects, you can access uh, several objects can access its own methods and variables. Along the way, sometimes you might have an attribute or methods that you specify the keyword static in front. I guess you've been using it before in the previous class. Previous course. Okay, let's have a look in the form of graphics, what that means. Okay, I guess you still remember that you used to use the word constant before as a keyword, right? And then static can be applied on methods and also for variables. Okay, let's say if you are given a class diagram like this, again we use the same example, which is circle, right? So along the way, when you write class diagram or draw class diagram, if you see plus sign, that means it's public. But when it is underlined like this, it is showing a static methods. Static methods means that even though you create many objects, um, it is only having one value. What that means is that, for example, we have a circle class, and then you create two objects for this circle class. For example, you create circle 1. Okay, this is normally the way that we draw it, right? Sorry, I apologize for the very bad handwriting. And also this. It's actually very hard to write because I'm not used to it. Okay, let's say you create two objects. The type is circle. The first one name is circle. The second one is circle 1. This one circle 2. Okay, so when you create like this, okay, radius, you have radius here, and then you have another variable which is called number of object. So this is defined as static. Okay, so let's say the value is 2. So when you create another object, which is the name is circle 2, this one can be whatever that you decide, but see, the value of the static variable in our case here is number of object is 2. Okay, so static means there is only one copy. Even though you create many of these objects here, it's still the same. Okay, so you can use variable that is defined as static, for example, for an array that you want to have only one copy. For example, you want to have an array of students for one class. So you don't want that if there are many objects, many arrays are being created. So it does not meet the purpose of having only one list, right? So it will have several lists. Maybe, for example, one class have 30 students, but if you do not control this, you do not put static in front. So maybe this object here has 20, this one have 10. So it's not uniform. So you use static whenever you want to have one copy. Okay, apologize for that slide. It's not complete. Okay. Previous class also you've been looking at, and I think you are aware of that you can control the access level, right? Or what is this called here as visibility modifier. Okay, you can control how the the attributes and method can be seen by outside of the class. Okay, so you normally use the word like public, private, right? When you put public in front of whatever attribute or methods, okay, this in even the class, it can be seen from other classes and also in other package. Okay, if you set it as private, that data and method can only be seen in the same class. Okay, so normally what you learn later, you'll be having a method called get and set. Okay, you do this in order to allow other classes to access the private attributes or methods. Uh, because instance data is private, okay, I mentioned just now, a class usually provides services to access and modify data values. So this method later on that you'll be using is a very simple method. One type is called accessor. Accessor means method to access, to get. So normally, accessor method is a method that start with get. For example, get name, okay, get name, get metric, and so on. Okay, sorry, very bad handwriting. And mutator means that you want to change the value. For example, previously the name of student is Ali, you want to change it to Siti. So normally we set like set name, for example. Okay, set address, set matrix, everything. Anything to change the value of a variable, you start it with set. Anything that you want to get the name or value from the attributes, from the private attributes, you use get. Okay, we have a look at this again. So normally we call it getter and setter. Okay, we have a look at this. Okay, okay. So I would like to highlight about the visibility again. Okay. Okay. This is the first example. The one followed is the second example. Okay. Let's say you have two classes in package one. Okay. If you write in your Java class, if you want to use package, you on top of the Java class, you write word package. Okay, let's say in this example, you write package 1 and then you start public class C1. So when you do that, so Java knows that you want to put C1 within package 1. Package 1 can be imagined like your folder, a folder in your computer. Okay, so you want to put C1 in the folder P1, or in this case in Java we call it package. And then we have another one, another class which called C2. Okay, as you can see here, we have public. Public. Okay, be aware of public, private right now. Okay, so in here we know integer x is public. Public means it can be used by other classes. Here it does not write anything. So when it does not write either public, private, or protected, so this is called as default modifier. Okay, default modifier restrict access to within a package. Okay, so if you do not write anything here, this is considered as default. So default can only be accessed in the same package. It can be accessed by other class, but that class should be in the same package. Okay, and then private can be only accessed within the class. Here you can access because C2 is another class. Okay. Then you can see here in the class C1 you have a method called M1 is public. This one M2 is a method that is default, meaning that it can only be accessed in this package only. Okay, and then in this same package you have C2. Okay, this is another class, and there's a method here called A method. A method here, see, nothing in front defined, so this is a default method. Can only be accessed by in the same package, only accessed in P1 package. Okay, for example, in this methods, A method, it create an object called O. O, the type is C1. So it's actually creating an object from C1. O equal new C1. So basically this is creating an object with the name of O and the type is C1. And then in here, let's say you're writing a code, but right now you're only writing it in a very simple manner. Don't write like this, okay? This is only for understanding. Let's say you put O dot X. So you want to access the variable X within C1. So yes, you can. Why? Because this is public. O dot Y still can, because even though it's default, you can access it in the same package, right? And in C2, you try to access O.Z. O.Z is cannot, because Z can only be accessed in C1. Okay. Can invoke O.mi method? Yes, can, because it's a public method. Invoke 0.m2? Yes, still can, because default can be accessed in the same package, even though it's in the different class, but in the same package. You try to invoke O.m3, cannot, because it's private. Anything private can only be accessed in the class, same class. Okay. Maybe you'll be asking, why troubling yourself by setting method and attribute in the form of private when you cannot even access it? Okay, you normally set a variable with private or method with private when you want it specially for that class. For example, maybe you have a calculation specially only for that. You do not want to share it with other. So if you think that variable is not, you don't want to share it with other, maybe because it's confidential, it's a secret, okay, you don't want to share it, or maybe you have a special calculation, so you set it as private. So if you are willing to share it, so you set it as public or maybe default. It's like when you want to share it with your family members, you set it with default. If you want to share it with your friends, you set it as public. If you have a secret and you don't want to reveal it to anybody, you set it as private. Okay. That is the construct of abstraction. Okay. It's information hiding. You want to hide info. You are not ready to reveal it to other. Okay. So this one happening in the same package. Let's say you have another package, assuming this is written by your friend in your and then she say to you, okay, you can copy my package and run it in your own computer. Okay, assuming that you don't know how to share it online. Okay, let's say she write a class called C3. She put it in another package. Again, you copy it and put it in your Java IDE. She has a method called a method also. She just set it as default. And then she want to call your class C1. Okay, because she say, maybe I think I can use your class because I want to use some of the methods here. I don't want to write my own. I want to use yours. Okay, she say C1 0 equal to C1. Okay. Okay, when she's from here, let's say you are running her code from a different package, and then in here you can still access O.x. Why? Because this is private, public. Okay. Other class, other package. O.y. O.y. O.y is this one, yeah? Cannot, because it's set as default. Mentioned to you just now, when you set as default, you can only access it in the same package, so you cannot access. Cannot access O.z, of course, because this is private. Private can only be accessed in the class that is come from. It can invoke 0.m1. M1, yes, you can. Public. Cannot invoke dot m2 method. Of course, default can only be accessed in the same package. Of course, cannot access m3 because it's private, can only be accessed here. Okay, another example, right? You have another also in package 1 and package 2, right? So this is a simpler one. So you have class. So this one, see, it does not define any public private. So this is assuming that it's a default class. Is actually default. And you have in the class called C2 is a public class because they are in the same package. C1 can be accessed here. But if you are in a different package, you are in a different class called C3, is a public class. Okay, you want to access C1 from package 2. You cannot. Okay, why? Because it is default. Default can only be accessed in the same package, but you can access C2, right? Okay, just to be aware again about this matter. For example, you have a class called F. Okay, not a good name for a class. Okay, you set it as public class. Okay, there is a variable boolean which is private. Okay, be careful. Okay, and then you are having this and then it has a method called convert, which is also private. Okay, be careful with this, meaning that X and convert method can only be accessed here. So you have a public static void main here, right? Because you want to run it. So what you do, you create an object of F. You create this object. Not a good name. F equal to new F. Okay, so it's using no argument constructor. Okay, see inside here it does not declare any constructor, right? So you can do this straight away. Java will support you without you defining it. And then you say print system.out.println f.x. You are basically trying to print x. Okay, you do not declare it, right? So it will automatically, I mentioned just now, I think in the previous video, if you do not declare it, Java will give you false value. And then system.out.println f.convert. F.convert is calling for this. Okay, this can happen. This is allowed. Why? Even though this is private, right? It can no issue with this because you run it in the same class. Let's say you cut and paste this, the public static void main method, you paste it in another class. Okay, this is a test class. You create a new class with the name of test, and then you copy this, cut here and paste it here. And then you want to run it. Okay, when you do this, compiler will not allow you. Why? Because you are in another class. You want to access the private method and attribute in another class. That is not allowed. So when you run it, Java will, the compiler will highlight it to you straight away. Okay. Yeah, I said to you, why trouble yourself to set it as private? Because you want to protect data. You feel that you don't want to share it with others. Maybe it's very private, or maybe the calculation is only for that class. You don't want to trouble people by maybe the calculation is not meeting their expectation, or whatever process that is very private to that class. Okay, at the same time, it's easy to maintain. Alright, so I mentioned to you all these are actually the concept of encapsulation. Okay, I think by now you know what this is, right? Minus sign means it's private. Plus sign is public. One, if you see something which is being underlined, that means it is a static method. Static variable, static method. Meaning that there's, even though you create circle many times, circle object many, maybe you create 5 objects of circle, but there is only one copy of this. Okay, if you still remember from the previous course, you used to use array, right? But during that time, you are using array to store primitive data. Now that you know about objects, you can actually handle your array much better. Because if I still remember, if you do not learn object before, let's say if you have a student, you want to capture information about student, let's say the name, the metric number, and the phone number. What you need to do is that you need to have 3 separate arrays, right? One for name, one for metric number, one for phone. It's very troublesome, right? So maybe you forgot to update it. Maybe the data for different students will be jumbled up. So by using array of objects, what you can do is you have one array. Okay, each of the location of the array, index of the array, you can put one whole object inside it. Okay. So for example here, if you have before this you used to put a new integer, new double, right? So now you put new circle. So for example, if you want to put have an array with the size of 10, and inside each of the index you want to put one object there rather than one information like integer or anything. Maybe circle, just now we have radius, right? So in one array index, not only that you can put, because you put one object, so you put you can keep the information of the attribute and also accessing the method. What will happen? Okay, let's have a look visually how it is represented. Let's say you create a circle array equal new circle with the size of 10. So you'll be having a circle array is the object variable. So again, because this is object type, so this one is having the address, okay, where basically it's pointing to the location of this array. This array is the size 10, and inside it is not the object yet. Okay, it's actually again it is having the address of the object. For example, so it will be like double reference. Okay, the first time it shows to the entire array. The second one is showing to one particular object. So in this case, we have 10 objects, right? So this one is showing the location of the first object, and the one follows. Okay, so these are the actual data is actually here, but the front part here is only showing the addresses or the references. So at this point of time, not only that you can capture the variable, but also you can access the method. If the method just now dot you have calculate area, so there is calculate area at 10 different objects. Okay, slightly different, right? So remember, in object oriented, there is a, I think we have looked at the concept of abstraction when we are talking about setting different visibility level, for example, protected, default, private, right? So another concept of object oriented, if you still remember, is polymorphism. Polymorphism means many form, meaning that there will be methods with the same name. Okay, one way of achieving polymorphism is through a concept called method overloading. Method overloading, there will be methods that have different number of parameter. Okay, if the number of formal parameter is the same in both method, the data type of the formal parameter in the order we list must be different. Okay, what that means is that, okay, in one class that you write, you can have a method with the same name. The return value will be the same. Okay, the name is different. The name is the same. Even the return value is the same, but what is different is the type of parameter that you use. Okay, so why are we having all this? It's because let's say this method is, for example, printing something. Okay, this one is printing only in the form of integer. This one is printing, maybe you want to set different format if you receive the different type of variable. Okay, so or maybe you have a calculation, you have a formula that the calculation is the same, but it is accepting different parameter. Okay, this is the concept of overloading. Overloading is a concept under polymorphism. So we will be looking at it more in greater details. For example, this is a simple one. I have a class called exam, and we are running it in the public static void main in the same class. Okay, so this is the overloading method happening here. One with call result, only accepting one parameter, which is a type of integer. This one is accepting 2. Okay, right. So when it runs here, because this is a very simple program, so the initial value is given straight away. Okay, and then an object is created called midsem. The type is exam, which is the same like this. So it's calling a no argument constructor. So this class does not define its own, so Java will automatically allow this to happen. Okay, and then it says here midsem dot result. So it's trying to access this one, result test1. Test1, the type is integer. So this is saying to the constructor, saying to the compiler, go and find a method called test that accepts an integer. So compiler will see this. This one compiler won't go at this line of code because this is having 2 parameters, right? So at this point of time here, compiler will go here. Okay, so here's T1, test 1 is 75. So test 1, 75 value here will pass to I. So I is actually 75. Okay, and then here it will increment by 1. So after it left this bracket and goes back here, test 1 become 76. This is I, right? So when it pass back here, so test, total test right now will have value of test value I right now. When it pass here, will have 76. Okay, and then it will print out. System.out.println line total test 1 76. And then the following line that follows, midsem, this object here that we created, dot result. But this is passing 2 parameter. So compiler will go and look which method that name is result and having 2 parameters. These 2 parameters, test 1, test 2, they are integer. 2 integers. So compiler will look for method with the name of result that accept 2 parameter of type integer. So when it happens here, compiler will go here. Okay, it will bring along test 2. Test 1 value is 75. Test 2 is 68. So here it will pass all the value. So this one will be bringing along the value of 75. So this one is 68. Okay, so I plus plus here will become 75 here. I plus plus is 76 plus 68 here. Sorry for the bad handwriting. So it will become how much? 76 plus 68. Pen. Sorry. Okay. This is 14. when it return the value here, and we come back here, so the value 144 will given to test2. So when it print total, test2 will become 144. Okay, so that's how it will become global. Okay, just to revisit what we have covered during the part 1 and part 2, we have a constructor. Constructor, if you still remember, method with the same name of the class. Even though it's a method, it has no type. Okay, it does not return any value. Okay, constructor are automatically executed when a class object is instantiated. Mentioned to you, if you do not define your own no argument parameter, Java will assume that you have, and it will create a new end object. A class can have more than one constructor. Okay, so that you have looked at it earlier. We can have more than one constructor. See, it has having the same name and it has different parameter. So that is the concept of overloading. With constructor, execute depends on the type of value it passes. Okay, so in here, so I've been looking at this kind of example before. So this is a class of student. There are two variables, name and integer. This is not defined anything here. So it's a default variable. And then here also they do not define it as public. Okay. So string. So this is a method with the same name of the class. So these are the constructor. Okay, so this one that you see is the concept of method overloading. Okay, where the same name but accepting different parameter. This one is having two. So this one is giving initial value to variable name and age, and then you will print it out. It depends. Sometimes you don't have to print it out, but because this is an example, so it print it out. Normally you don't print it out, but this is just to show you as an example. Method overload constructor is meant to initialize the value. So in here it's only passing initialize only the name, but this is set to you. Maybe because you want to have your own purpose on why to do that. Okay, and then you have a public static void main inside the same class. Okay, so I guess that's why it does not set public in front here. Okay, so you have so here you are basically creating two objects. The first one is using the first constructor, accepting two variable. One is string, one is integer. So when this line of code are executed, Java compiler will go and check this, execute this constructor. Okay, and then one object is created, my student one. And then when the second line of code, you have new student Adeline, also only accepting one string, one parameter which is of type string. So when this happens, it will actually compiler will go and look for a constructor with only one parameter of type string, so it will execute it. Okay, so you bring